Lincolnshire, England. The year is roughly 1325 A.D. Outside the thick stone walls of the manor, the wind howls across the fenlands, carrying the scent of wood smoke and damp earth. Inside, the only light comes from the flickering tallow candles of the scriptorium. The silence is heavy, broken only by the rhythmic scratching sound of a quill moving across vellum. A master scribe is at work. He is copying the Psalms of David, sacred words intended to save a soul from purgatory. But look closer at the margins of the holy page. In the shadows of the gold leaf and the lapis lazuli, something chaotic is taking shape. Here a knight is not fighting a dragon. He is jousting against a snail. There, a creature with the head of a man and the body of a pot is cooking its own legs. A woman beats her husband with a distaff. These are not the images of heaven. They are the babewyns, the grotesque, the absurd, and the terrifying nightmares of the medieval mind. Hidden right next to the prayers of God. This book is a paradox. It is a masterpiece of devotion and a gallery of madness. For nearly 700 years, this manuscript lay hidden, surviving the Black Death, the dissolution of the monasteries, and the ravages of civil war. Today, it rests in the hushed, climate-controlled vaults of the British Library, known to the world as the Luttrell Psalter. It is widely considered one of the most significant manuscripts ever created in England, not because of its prayers, but because of its pictures. To the untrained eye, it is a relic of the past. But to historians, it is a crime scene of clues. It offers us the most vivid, high-definition window we possess into the reality of 14th-century life. It shows us how people plowed the fields, how they cooked, how they suffered, and what they feared in the dark. But why was it made? Why did a wealthy, serious nobleman commission a holy book filled with monsters and chaos? The answer lies buried in the ink and in the ego of one man who wanted to live forever. To understand the book, we must first understand the man who paid for it. His name appears clearly in the text. Dominus Galfridus Luttrell, Sir Geoffrey Luttrell. He was not a king, nor was he a peasant. He was the Lord of Irnham, a powerful knight of the realm, a man of immense wealth and status in an England that was teetering on the edge of disaster. The early 14th century was a time of famine, political rebellion, and the looming shadow of war with Scotland and France. Yet, amidst this turmoil, Sir Geoffrey decided to spend a fortune on art. We can see him on page 202, verso. The artist has painted him. Larger than life, sitting atop a magnificent warhorse, he is fully armored, distinct in his heraldry. Blue and silver martlets stamped across his shield and surcoat. He looks powerful, imperious. His wife, Agnes, and his daughter-in-law hand him his helmet and shield. It is a projected image of perfect feudal order. A snapshot of a man who believes he is the center of his world. But historians suggest this image was a desperate attempt to freeze time. By the time this book was commissioned, around 1325 to 1330, Sir Geoffrey was aging. he was aware of his mortality. In the medieval mind, the only way to shorten your time in purgatory, that terrifying waiting room between heaven and hell, was to leave behind something holy, something that would ensure people prayed for you long after your flesh had turned to dust. The creation of such a manuscript was not a hobby. It was an industrial undertaking of immense proportions. It required the skin of hundreds of calves to create the vellum pages. Imagine the scale of the slaughter. Whole herds of cattle processed to create the smooth, creamy surface upon which the scribe would write. The preparation of the parchment alone would have taken months, soaking the skins in lime, scraping them with a lunellum blade until they were impossibly thin, stretching them until the tension made them drum-tight. Then came the ink, iron gall ink, a chemical mixture made from oak galls, iron salts, and wine. It was corrosive, biting into the skin of the vellum to become permanent, and the colors, crushed lapis lazuli, brought from the mines of Afghanistan for the brilliant blues, malachite for the greens, lead white and vermilion red, and finally, the gold leaf, hammered thinner than a breath, applied with glare, a glue made from egg whites, and burnished with a dog's tooth or an agate stone until it caught the candlelight and shone like the sun. This was not a book to be read. It was an object to be displayed, a status symbol equivalent to a private jet or a super yacht in the modern world. But Sir Geoffrey did not hire a monk to do this work. The style of the art suggests he hired professional, secular artists, a team we now call the Luttrell Master and his assistants. These were men who lived in the city, perhaps Lincoln or York, men who saw the world not just through theology, but through observation. Sir Geoffrey gave them a commission. Make me a psalter. He expected the Psalms, the calendar of saints, the litany. He expected his portrait, but what he got, or perhaps what he allowed, was an explosion of creativity that defied all convention. The artists began to fill the empty spaces, the marginalia, with scenes that had nothing to do with the text. While the Latin text chanted Beatus Vir, blessed is the man, the pictures below showed a world of anarchy. Why? Was it simply decoration? Or was there a deeper, darker logic at play? To understand the Luttrell Psalter, we must step away from the gold leaf of the nobility and look down into the mud where the real story begins. The story of the people who paid for Geoffrey's wealth with their sweat, and the monsters that haunted their dreams. The manuscript is famous for its depictions of rural life. It is the single most cited source for agricultural history in medieval England. But these are not photographs. They are idealized, almost propagandistic images of a well-ordered estate. We see the plowman guiding the oxen, the sower casting seeds, the harrower breaking the soil. It looks peaceful. It looks like a pastoral idyll. But look closer at the faces of the peasants. They are grotesque, exaggerated, sometimes bordering on subhuman. This brings us to the first great mystery of the Luttrell Psalter, the intent of the satire. Was Sir Geoffrey mocking his workers? Or were the artists men of a lower class themselves, mocking Sir Geoffrey? Consider the image of the cooking scene. We see servants preparing a feast for the Lord's table. It is chaotic, hot, intense. A man is chopping meat with a cleaver that looks dangerously sharp. Another is turning a spit roast. The fire blazes. It is a scene of consumption. But in the margins nearby, strange hybrid monsters mirror the action, devouring each other. Is the artist drawing a parallel? Is he suggesting that the feudal lord's appetite is just another form of monstrosity? The ambiguity is what makes it timeless. We are looking at a society that was rigidly hierarchical, yet the art is fluid, rebellious, and strange. We are about to enter the grotesque, the world of the margins, where the laws of nature and God seem to be suspended. We leave the ordered fields of the plowman and enter the realm of the nightmare. In art history, these marginal figures have a name. They are called babewyns, an old Middle English term derived from the Italian babau, meaning a bugbear or a fool. And in the Luttrell Psalter, the babewyns have taken over. Turn the page, and the logic of the world dissolves. We are confronted with creatures that defy biological explanation. A head of a bishop grafted onto the body of a bird. A creature with the face of a lion, the wings of a bat, and the tail of a serpent. These are not merely doodles. They are painted with the same expensive pigments and the same meticulous care as the face of Christ. The artist is showing us a world upside down, a mundus inversus. In the medieval mind, the world was a hierarchy ordained by God. God above, angels below, then men, then beasts. But in the margin of Sir Geoffrey's book, that ladder of being has been smashed to pieces. Here we see a rabbit, a creature of prey, a symbol of timidity, hunting a dog. It stands on two legs, armed with a club, beating the hound into submission. To a modern viewer, this is a cartoon. But to a 14th-century viewer, this was a terrifying image of social anarchy. It whispered a dangerous question. What happens if the weak rise up against the strong? What happens if the natural order collapses? Remember, this book was created in the 1320s and 30s. England was not stable. King Edward II had been deposed and murdered, a horrific violation of the divine right of kings. The Great Famine of 1315 had killed millions, reducing men to eating grass. And sometimes it was whispered, each other. The world felt like it was unraveling. The babewyns were not just jokes. They were manifestations of a deep societal anxiety. They were the demons of chaos, constantly nibbling at the edges of the holy text, just as chaos was nibbling at the edges of English society. The mystery of the snail. And then we find the most famous and baffling image of all. On folio 139, a fully armored knight drops to one knee. He raises his shield, draws his sword, and braces himself for a fight to the death. His opponent is a snail. This is not a unique image. It appears in manuscripts across Europe, but the Luttrell Psalter's version is one of the most vivid. Why is a warrior fighting a garden pest? Historians have debated this for decades, and the theories range from the political to the profound. Some argue the snail represents the Lombards, the moneylenders of medieval Europe, who were stereotyped as cowardly and slimy, yet dangerous. Others suggest the snail is a symbol of the resurrection, as it emerges from its shell like Christ from the tomb, making the knight a fool for fighting God. But there is a darker theory. The snail, with its hard shell and ability to retreat, represents the inevitability of the grave. No matter how strong your armor, no matter how sharp your sword, the slow, slime-trailed creep of death and decay will eventually conquer you. The knight is fighting a battle he cannot win. It is a moment of memento mori. Remember that you will die, hidden in a visual pun. The images in the Luttrell Psalter are like a code, a language of symbols that we have largely forgotten how to read. We see the humor, but we miss the warning. History is full of these lost languages, waiting to be deciphered. If you want to join us as we unlock more secrets from the dusty archives of the past, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. We delve into the shadows of history every week, and you won't want to miss what we find next. The theology of distraction. But why allow this in a prayer book? Why would a priest or a lord want to look at a woman feeding a monster while chanting the Psalms? The answer lies in the medieval concept of the testing of the soul. Reading a psalter was a spiritual exercise. It required focus. But the devil was always waiting. The medieval church taught that demons were everywhere, invisible, chattering, distracting. They were the titivilus, the demon who collected all the mumbled words and skipped prayers to use against you in the final judgment. The monsters in the margins may have served a psychological function. They represented the distractions of the world. By placing them on the page, the artist traps them. The viewer acknowledges the distraction, sees the grotesque beast, and then must actively choose to look away and return their eyes to the Latin text. It is a training ground for the mind. To read the Luttrell Psalter is to battle your way through a landscape of demons to reach the Word of God. However, there is one figure that seems to break the fourth wall. The Luttrell master drew faces that look back at us. On one page, a hybrid creature, half man, half dragon, stares directly out of the vellum. His expression is not angry. It is almost sad. It is a look of weary resignation. As we move deeper into the manuscript, the imagery shifts again. We move away from the mythological and back to the mechanical. But even the machines of the 14th century hold secrets. The Psalter gives us an incredibly detailed depiction of a watermill. We see the eels caught in the traps. We see the massive timber gears. It is a celebration of technology. But notice the layout. The mill is dark. The water is murky. In the medieval era, the mill was a place of scandal. It was where the villagers gathered away from the eyes of the priest. It was a place of theft, where millers were often accused of stealing grain, and a place of illicit lovers. Sir Geoffrey includes the mill because it represents his income. He owned the mills, and he took a cut of every grain ground there. It is a reminder to God, look at the wealth I manage. But to the artist, it is another stage for the human comedy. The text itself, the Psalms, speaks of mercy and humility. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Yet the images below the text scream of power and violence. We see a wife beating her husband with a spinning distaff, a classic medieval trope of the dominating wife, used to shame men who couldn't control their households. We see bear baiting, a cruel sport where a chained bear was attacked by dogs for entertainment. The blood, the noise, the cruelty, it is all rendered in delicate strokes of pink and ochre. This dissonance is the key. The Luttrell Psalter is not a book of peace. It is a book of tension. It captures the friction between the ideal Christian life that Sir Geoffrey wanted to project and the messy, violent, contradictory reality of the world he actually lived in. But there is a turning point coming. The manuscript was never truly finished. The hands change. The style shifts. The Luttrell master, the genius behind the greatest monsters, disappears from the pages. Why? What happened in the scriptorium around 1340? To understand the fate of the book, we must look at the fate of the world outside the window. A darkness was coming from the east, a pestilence that would make the painted monsters of the margins look like harmless pets. Sometime around the year 1340, the brush stopped. If you turn the pages of the Luttrell Psalter carefully, looking with the eye of an art critic, you will notice a jarring shift. The Luttrell master, the genius who gave us the jousting snail, the detailed ploughman, and the expressive, terrified faces of the peasants, simply disappears. The intricate, fluid lines are replaced by stiffer, cruder drawings. The gold leaf is applied with less precision. The monsters lose their terrifying spark and become clumsy caricatures. It is as if the lights in the scriptorium flickered and dimmed. Historians have analyzed the hands and identified at least 4 distinct artists working on the book. But the departure of the first hand, the master, signals a crisis. Did he die? Did he have a falling out with Sir Geoffrey? Or more likely, did the money run out? Creating a manuscript of this magnitude was a financial black hole. It cost the equivalent of a small castle. Sir Geoffrey Luttrell was wealthy, but even the deepest pockets have bottoms. The sudden drop in quality suggests a rush to finish. The project had dragged on for years. Sir Geoffrey was growing old. The urgency to complete the prayer book before the Lord of Irnham met his maker became the primary driver. The art became secondary to the function. They needed the prayers to be ready. The end of an era. On the 23rd of May 1345, the inevitable happened. Sir Geoffrey Luttrell died. He was buried in the church at Irnham, under a grand stone tomb that still exists today, though it is worn by centuries of feet and time. The Psalter, his magnum opus, was likely placed upon the altar or kept in the family's private chapel. It had done its job. It was a spiritual insurance policy, a beautiful object intended to scream his name to heaven. Dominus Galfridus Luttrell. But Sir Geoffrey was fortunate in his timing. He died in a world that was still recognizable. He died believing that his lineage, his estate, and the feudal order depicted in his book would last forever. He did not know that he had missed the apocalypse by a mere 3 years. The Great Mortality. Turn the page from the manuscript to the history books. The date is June 1348. A ship arrives in the port of Melcombe Regis in Dorset. It carries a cargo of spices, cloth, and Yersinia pestis, the Great Mortality, the Black Death. It moved like a slow, suffocating fog across the countryside. It reached Lincolnshire, the home of the Luttrell family, by 1349. And this is where the Luttrell Psalter transforms from a work of art into a tragic memorial. Look again at the faces of the peasants in the margins, the sowers, the reapers, the cooks, the musicians. When the artist painted them in the 1330s, they were living, breathing people, tenants on the Luttrell estate. We don't know their names, but the artist surely did. He sketched them from life. Statistically, within 3 years of Sir Geoffrey's death, half of the people depicted in this book were dead. The plague did not discriminate, but it devastated the laboring class. The very people shown harvesting the grain in the Psalter were wiped out in such numbers that the crops rotted in the fields. The cattle wandered aimlessly, unmilked and untended, until they too died of neglect or murrain. The silence that fell over Lincolnshire would have been deafening. The Luttrell Psalter, therefore, is a time capsule of a doomed world. It captures the final moments of high medieval England before it was broken forever. The feudal system, where the lord sat on his horse and the peasant bowed in the mud, could not survive the plague. With so few workers left alive, the survivors demanded higher wages. They realized their worth. The rigid hierarchy that Sir Geoffrey spent a fortune immortalizing in gold leaf was dismantled by a microscopic bacterium. The ghost in the archives. There is a haunting irony here. Sir Geoffrey commissioned the book to ensure his own legacy, to cement his status as the eternal lord of Arnhem. But today, when we look at the Luttrell Psalter, we barely think of Geoffrey. We look past the knight in the shiny armor. Our eyes are drawn to the margins. We look at the woman feeding the chickens. We look at the boy scaring away the crows. We look at the wrestler lifting his opponent. We look at the life. The book preserved the very people Sir Geoffrey likely ignored. It gave immortality not to the lord, but to the serfs. In his attempt to glorify himself, he accidentally created the greatest monument to the common people of the Middle Ages. The manuscript itself survived the chaos. It passed down through the Luttrell family for centuries. It sat on shelves while the Wars of the Roses turned England red. It survived the Reformation, when Henry VIII's men burned libraries and smashed idols. It survived the English Civil War, where precious manuscripts were often cut up to make wadding for muskets. It sat in the dark, gathering dust, its colors protected by the closed covers. The blue of the lapis lazuli remained electric. The gold remained untarnished. Inside the book, it was always 1330. The harvest was always good. The night was always young. The snail was always losing. The resurrection of the text. It wasn't until the modern era that the book re-emerged into the public consciousness. And when it did, it baffled the Victorians. They didn't know what to make of the monsters. They tried to edit them out in early reproductions, focusing only on the wholesome agricultural scenes. They wanted the history of the plough, not the history of the nightmare. But you cannot have one without the other. The Luttrell Psalter is a testament to the dual nature of humanity. We are ploughmen, and we are monsters. We are pious, and we are profane. We build cathedrals, and we dream of demons. As we move toward the conclusion of our investigation, we have one final layer to peel back. We have looked at the pictures, we have looked at the history, but we haven't looked at the sound. A manuscript is a recording device, if you know how to listen. And the Luttrell Psalter is loud. We often think of history as silent. We look at black and white photos or crumbling ruins, and we imagine a hush. But the Luttrell Psalter demands to be heard. If you close your eyes and listen to the images, the silence of the library vanishes. This manuscript is incredibly loud. It is filled with musicians. We see drummers beating rhythms that would have accompanied village festivals. We see trumpeters blowing fanfares that signaled the arrival of the hunt. And, most notably, we see the bagpipes. In the margins of Psalm 150, while the text reads, "Praise him," with the sound of the trumpet, the artist has drawn a peasant puffing his cheeks, playing the bagpipes. In the 14th century, the bagpipe was not the noble instrument of Scottish regiments. It was the instrument of the beast. It was loud, chaotic, and associated with animal lust. It was the sound of the tavern, not the church. By placing a bagpiper next to a holy verse, the artist is engaging in a visual pun known as charivari, or rough music. It is a sonic rebellion. The Latin text chants the orderly, melodic, Gregorian plainsong of the monks. But the margins scream with the discordant, earthy, raucous noise of the peasantry. It is a clash of cultures, the sacred and the profane, happening on the same piece of vellum. It reminds us that medieval England was not a place of grey misery. It was a place of vibrant, noisy, colourful life, even in the shadow of death, the near loss of a national treasure. For centuries, this noisy, chaotic book remained in the possession of the Luttrell family. It was an heirloom, passed from generation to generation, safe in the library of Lulworth Castle. But in the 20th century, the old world began to collapse. The great estates could no longer be maintained. Taxes rose. The aristocracy began to sell off the family silver. In 1929, the Luttrell Psalter was put up for sale at Sotheby's in London. The news sent a shockwave through the British establishment. This was not just a book. It was the visual soul of England. It was the primary evidence of the nation's agricultural past. And there was a very real, very terrifying possibility that it would leave the country forever. The American tycoon, J. Pierpont Morgan, the man whose collection became the famous Morgan Library in New York, had his eyes on it. He had the money to outbid anyone. The British Museum, now the British Library, was desperate. They did not have the funds to compete with American industrial wealth. It came down to a dramatic 11th-hour rescue. It wasn't the government that saved the Luttrell Psalter. It was the public. In a move that foreshadowed modern crowdfunding, an appeal was launched. But the true hero was a man named J. P. Morgan himself, in a twist of fate. Or rather, the British Museum secured a loan from him. No, that's a myth. The truth is, the British Museum utilized a massive anonymous donation, later revealed to be from J. Pierpont Morgan himself, to the British nation. But specifically, they had to raise matching funds. The British public, impoverished after the First World War, rallied. But it was a wealthy benefactor, Lord Wakefield, and the sheer determination of the museum curators that kept the hammer from falling to a foreign buyer. They secured the book for £31,500, a staggering sum in 1929, equivalent to millions today. It was the first time the nation realized that its history was something that could be bought and sold, and something that had to be fought for. The mirror of the past. So, what are we to make of Dominus Galfridus Luttrell's book today? When we stare at the digital scans on the British Library's website, zooming in until we can see the pores on the vellum and the cracks in the gold leaf, what do we see? We see a vanity project that went wrong in the most beautiful way possible. Sir Geoffrey wanted a mirror that would reflect his glory. He wanted a book that said, "I am rich, I am pious, and I am in control." But the artists gave us a different mirror. They gave us a mirror that reflects the anxiety of the human condition. They showed us that even 700 years ago, people were afraid of the unknown. They showed us that people found humor in the absurd, in a knight fighting a snail, in a rabbit hunting a dog. They showed us that no matter how much gold you paint over it, reality is messy. The Luttrell Psalter defies reality because it refuses to be just one thing. It is not just a prayer book. It is not just a comic strip. It is not just a farm manual. It is a testament to the complexity of the medieval mind. A mind that could hold the fear of hell and the joy of a dirty joke in the exact same thought. The hands that ploughed the fields of Irnham are dust. The castle of Sir Geoffrey is a ruin. The ink maker, the illuminator, the scribe. They are all gone, swept away by the river of time. Even the prayers they whispered are largely forgotten by the modern world. But the book remains. It sits in its glass case, defying the decay that has claimed everything else. The blue is still blue. The gold still shines. And the monsters in the margins still wait for you to notice them. They are the guardians of a lost world, whispering to us across the centuries. reminding us that while technology changes, human nature, with all its fears, its humor, and its desire to be remembered, remains exactly the same. History is not just about dates and battles. It is about the marks we leave behind. Sir Geoffrey left us a psalm. The artist left us a snail. And perhaps, in the end, the snail is the one that tells the truer story. Thank you for journeying with us into the illuminated shadows of the 14th century. If this investigation into the Luttrell Psalter has sparked a light in your mind, consider sharing this documentary with a fellow seeker of hidden truths. History is a vast, dark archive, and we have only just opened the door. There are thousands of manuscripts, thousands of mysteries still waiting to be decoded. To ensure you are with us for the next discovery, subscribe to Annalist and ring the bell. Until then, keep looking in the margins. You never know what monsters you might find.